Today was supposed to be the last day of my bookstore. I was packing up 3 years of dreams when a sad old man walked in and became my final customer. I gave him a rare book for free, thinking it was a fitting end to my story. Then he handed me his business card and I discovered he was the ruthless developer who owned my building and was planning to demolish it. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know, what's your favorite book? Drop it in the comments below and be sure to subscribe for more amazing stories every day. Now let me take you back to the day I thought my dreams were ending. The morning sun streamed through the windows of chapter and verse, casting long shadows across the empty shelves that had once held my entire world. I stood in the middle of my bookstore, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the remnants of a dream that was officially ending today. 3 years, that's how long I'd managed to keep this place alive, pouring every penny I had, every ounce of energy, every sleepless night, into creating something I believed the world needed, a real honest-to-goodness independent bookstore in an age when everyone bought their books online. You're being naive, Olivia, my sister, had warned me when I'd first signed the lease. Physical bookstores are dying. Online shopping killed them all. Not all of them, I'd insisted. People still want to touch books, smell them, discover something unexpected. I'd been wrong, or maybe I'd been right, about what people wanted, but wrong about what they were willing to pay for. The numbers didn't lie. Despite my carefully curated selection, my cozy reading nooks, and my weekly book clubs and author events, I was hemorrhaging money. The rent had increased twice in 3 years. Online retailers were undercutting my prices by 30%, and my customer base was shrinking every month. Yesterday, I'd sold my last book to Mrs. Owl, a regular customer who'd been coming in since my opening day. She'd bought a cookbook and given me a hug that lasted longer than usual. "I'm going to miss this place, dear," she'd said, tears in her eyes. "It won't be the same neighborhood without chapter and verse. I'm going to miss it too," I'd replied, trying not to cry in front of her. Now, on this gray October morning, I was alone with my boxes and my regrets. The moving track would arrive at noon to take my remaining inventory to a storage unit. Tomorrow, the space would be empty, waiting to be demolished and given space to a luxurious condo. I picked up a copy of The Bookish Life of Nina Hill from the returns pile and smiled sadly. It had been one of my hands' favorites, a book I'd recommended to dozens of customers who'd fallen in love with her quirky heroine and her devotion to books. Now it would go back to the distributor, along with hundreds of other stories that had never found their readers. The bell above the door chimed and I looked up in surprise. I'd already flipped the sign to closed and lock the door, but there, standing in my doorway, was an elderly man in an expensive-looking charcoal gray coat. "I'm sorry," I called out, "but we're actually closed. Today was our last day." The man stepped inside, removing his hat to reveal silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He was probably in his 70s, with the bearing of someone who'd been successful in life, but carried a weight of sadness around his shoulders. "I know," he said quietly. "I saw the sign in the window. I was hoping I might browse for just a few minutes. I've been meaning to visit this place for months, and I'd hate to miss my chance entirely." Something in his voice, a genuine love for books, perhaps, or the same melancholy I was feeling, made me nod. "Of course, though. I'm afraid most of the good stuff is already packed away. I'm sure I'll find Something, he said, beginning to wander through the partially dismantled store. I watched him move through the space, with the reverence of someone who understood what bookstores meant. He didn't just glance at titles, he picked up books, read back covers, opened to random pages. He handled each volume like it might contain something precious. You've created something beautiful here, he said after a few minutes of browsing. I can feel the love that went into this place. Thank you, I said, surprised by how much his words meant to me. I tried to make it special. What made you want to open a bookstore? I leaned against the counter, grateful for the chance to talk about something other than failure and bankruptcy. I've loved books my entire life. When I was a kid, the local bookstore was my sanctuary. Mrs. Wilson, the owner, knew exactly what I'd like before I did. She introduced me to authors who changed my life, let me sit in the corner and read for hours, made me feel like books were magic. And you wanted to do that for others. Exactly. I wanted to create a place where people could discover their next favorite book, where authors could connect with readers, where the community could gather around stories. I gestured at the empty shelves. I guess I was more romantic than realistic. The man nodded thoughtfully. Romance and realism don't have to be mutually exclusive. Sometimes the world just isn't ready for what we're offering, or sometimes we're just not good enough at business to make it work. I doubt that's true. Running an independent bookstore in today's market is like trying to grow orchids in a desert. The fact that you lasted a few years is remarkable. I felt tears threatening and blinked back. Tell that to my landlord or my creditors. The man continued browsing, and I went back to packing, but we kept talking. He asked about my favorite books, my most memorable customers, the authors who'd done events at the store. I found myself telling him stories I hadn't thought about in months. The elderly man who'd proposed to his girlfriend in the poetry section, the teenager who discovered her love of science fiction at one of my book clubs, the local author whose first signing I'd hosted when no one else would take a chance on her. You've touched more lives than you know. He said that matters even if the business didn't work out. I keep telling myself that, but it's hard to not feel like I failed. Failure is just another word for an ending that came sooner than we hoped. It doesn't negate everything that came before. After about 20 minutes, he stopped in front of a small display case I kept near the register. Inside were a few rare and first edition books, my most valuable inventory, the pieces I'd been saving for special customers or special occasions. Is that a first edition of Tequila? Mockingbird, he asked, his voice filled with wonder. It is 1960, excellent condition. It's been one of my prize pieces. May I see it? I unlocked the case and carefully handed him the book. He held it like it was made of spun glass, opening it gently to examine the copyright page. This is extraordinary. I've been looking for a copy like this for years. My late wife was a high school English teacher, and this was her favorite book to teach. She had a first edition once, but it was lost in a house here, along with most of her library. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you. She passed away 2 years ago. I've been trying to rebuild some of her collection. To honor her memory, this would have meant the world to her. Well, then you should have it, I said impulsively. He looked up in surprise. I couldn't possibly. This must be worth several hundred. It is, but some books are meant to find their right owner, and I think this one just did. I insist on paying you for it. I'm afraid my card reader is broken and I already deposited today's cash. Besides, what's the point of having a beautiful book if it's just going to sit in a storage unit? Your wife would have loved knowing it was going to someone who truly appreciates it. The man stared at me for a long moment, and I could see emotions playing across his face: gratitude, surprise, and something that looked like recognition. You're remarkable, he said finally, in a world that's increasingly transactional. You're still operating from the heart. Maybe that's why I'm going out of business, I said with a rueful laugh. Or maybe that's exactly why the world needs more people like you. He carefully tucked the book into his coat pocket, then reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card. I want you to have this. I know you said you don't want payment, but I'd like to stay in touch. Perhaps there's some way I can help you with your next venture. I took the card without looking at it, focused on his kind face. That's very generous, but I think I'm done with bookstores. Maybe it's time to try something more practical or get a job somewhere. Don't give up on books entirely. The world needs people who understand their power. He headed toward the door, then paused and turned back. Thank you, Olivia. You've reminded me of something I'd forgotten. What's that? Why stories matter. After he left, I stood alone in my empty store, feeling strangely lighter despite the circumstances. There had been something magical about that interaction, something that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with book selling in the first place. I looked down at the business card he'd given me, expecting to see the name of a fellow book lover or perhaps a small business owner who understood my struggles. Instead, I felt the blood drain from my face. The card read Jonah Gilbert, CEO, Gilbert Development Group. Jonah Gilbert, the name I'd been cursing for months, the ruthless real estate developer who'd bought my entire block and was planning to demolish it for luxury condominiums, the man whose company had been sending me eviction notices, whose lawyers had been pressuring the landlord to break my lease early, the man who was single-handedly responsible for destroying not just my bookstore, but the entire character of our neighborhood. I sank into the chair behind my counter, staring at the card in disbelief. The kind, book-loving gentleman who just spent 20 minutes talking to me about the importance of independent bookstores was the same person who was about to tear down the building that housed my dreams. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Thank you again for the book and the conversation. Would you be available to meet tomorrow morning? I have a proposition that might interest you, Jonah Gilbert. I stared at the message, my mind reeling. What kind of proposition could the man who was evicting me possibly have? Was this some kind of cruel joke? Had he come into my store on its last day just to gloat? But that didn't match the person I just met. The man who'd handled that first edition with such reverence, who'd spoken about his late wife with such love, who understood exactly what I was trying to create with chapter and verse. That person hadn't seemed capable of cruelty. I spent the rest of the day packing in a daze, replaying our conversation and trying to reconcile the gentle book lover with the corporate shark I'd imagined. By the time the moving truck arrived, I'd convinced myself that meeting with him was a terrible idea. What could we possibly have to discuss? But curiosity won out over caution. That evening I texted back, I'll meet with you, but I can't imagine what we have to talk about. His response came immediately. More than you might think. Tomorrow, 10:00 a.m., Cafe Luna on 5th Street. The next morning, I arrived at Cafe Luna. 15 minutes early, nursing a coffee and trying to prepare myself for whatever this meeting would bring. I'd spent the night researching Jonah Gilbert online, and what I'd found hadn't been encouraging. Gilbert Development Group was known for buying up historic neighborhoods and replacing them with generic luxury housing. Jonah Gilbert himself was described in business journals as ruthlessly efficient and uncompromising. In his vision, there were photos of him at groundbreaking ceremonies, always expensive suits, always looking confident and slightly cold. None of those photos matched the man who'd browsed my bookstore with such gentle appreciation. At exactly 10:00 a.m., Jonah walked into the cafe. He spotted me immediately and approached with what looked like nervous energy. "Olivia, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I wasn't sure you would. After you realized who I was, I'm still not sure why I did," I said. "Honestly, what could we possibly have to discuss?" He sat down across from me, ordering a black coffee from the waitress before turning his full attention to me. "I want to start by apologizing," he said. "I should have told you who I was yesterday, but I was so enchanted by your store, by our conversation, that I didn't want to ruin the moment. So you knew I was the owner of the store, and you knew you had just bought the whole quarter, and you knew you were the one forcing me to close my store, right? I knew you were the owner of chapter and verse. Yes, I'd been meaning to visit your store for months, but I kept putting it off. When I saw the closing notice, I realized it was my last chance. Why did you want to visit?" Jonah was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "Because 30 years ago, I was a lot like you." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I was a young man with a head full of dreams and a heart full of stories. I wanted to be a writer, Olivia. I spent my 20s working on novels that never got published, short stories that never found homes, poems that never saw the light of day." I studied his face, trying to imagine this successful businessman as a struggling artist. What happened? Life happened. My father's construction company was failing, and I had to choose between my writing dreams and saving the family business. I chose practicality over passion, and I've spent the last 3 decades building an empire on that choice. "And you regret it?" I thought I had made peace with it. I told myself that providing housing was just as important as creating art, that I was contributing to society in a different but equally valuable way. He paused, looking out the window. "But yesterday in your store, I remembered what I'd given up. I remembered why stories matter. Jonah, I appreciate you sharing this with me, but I still don't understand why we're here. You're still planning to demolish my building, aren't you?" "That was the plan. Yes, luxury condominiums. Maximum profit, minimum sentiment. It's what I've been doing for 30 years. Was yesterday changed something for me? Olivia, watching you give me that book, seeing the love you'd poured into that space, remembering what it felt like to believe that art could change the world. It made me realize that I've been building the wrong things." I felt a flutter of hope, but tried to keep my expression neutral. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that instead of tearing down your building, I want to save it. I want to bring chapter and verse back to life. And I want you to help me do it." I stared at him in disbelief. "You want to save my bookstore? I want to do more than that. I want to create something extraordinary, a literary district with your bookstore as the centerpiece. Imagine chapter and verse, but bigger, better funded, surrounded by complementary businesses. a cafe that serves book-themed drinks, a writing center that offers workshops and retreats, affordable housing for artists. And writers, you're serious, completely. Serious, I've spent all night thinking. About this, Olivia, I have the resources to make it happen, but I need someone who understands what we're trying to create. I need someone who still believes in the magic of books. But why? Me, you could hire any number of experienced bookstore managers because you're not just a bookstore manager. You're someone who gives away first editions to strangers because you believe books should find their right owners. You're someone who spent 3 years fighting for something you believed in, even when it was financially impossible. You're someone who understands that bookstores aren't just businesses. They're sanctuaries. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Jonah, this sounds incredible, but I can't afford to invest in anything right now. I'm broke. I have debt from the store that I'll be paying off for years. I'm not asking you to invest money. I'm asking you to invest your passion, your expertise, your vision. I'll provide the capital. You provide the soul. What would that look like, practically speaking? You'd be the creative director of the entire literary district. You design the new chapter and verse, curate the inventory, plan the events, hire the staff. You'd have a budget that would make your old store look like a lemonade stand. And what would you get out of it? Jonah smiled, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked truly happy. I'd get to be part of something that matters. I'd get to honor my wife's memory by supporting the kind of place she loved. And maybe, just maybe, I'd get to remember what it felt like to believe in dreams again. We spent the next 2 hours talking about possibilities. Jonah had clearly been thinking about this all night. He had ideas about square footage, about partnerships with local schools and libraries, about creating a space that would serve the entire community. The building next door is also part of my development. He explained we could expand chapter and verse into both spaces. The main floor would be the bookstore, fiction, nonfiction, children's books, a rare book section. The second floor could house the writing center with classrooms for workshops, private spaces for authors to work, maybe even a small performance area for readings, and the cafe ground floor of the adjacent building with a connecting doorway to the bookstore. We could call it Between the Lines or something like that. Book themed menu, comfortable seating, place where people can read while they eat. I found myself getting caught up in his enthusiasm despite my lingering skepticism. What about the residential component? Upper floors of both buildings, affordable apartments for writers, artists, teachers, people who contribute to the cultural life of the community, but often get priced out of neighborhoods like this one. Jonah, this sounds amazing, but it also sounds incredibly expensive. Are you sure you want to invest this much in something that might not be profitable? Olivia, I've spent 30 years building things that were guaranteed to be profitable, and I've never felt as excited about a project as I do about this one. Sometimes the best investments aren't measured in dollars, but your company, your shareholders, won't they object to you abandoning a lucrative development for something so idealistic? Gilbert Development Group is a private company. I answer to myself and my conscience, and my conscience is telling me that the world has enough luxury condominiums and not enough places where people can fall in love with books. This is my passion project, Olivia, but I also sense that it will attract more tourists, visitors. I'm sure it will pay itself. Over the following weeks, Jonah proved that he was serious about the project. He hired architects who specialized in historic preservation, brought in contractors who understood the importance of maintaining the building's character while updating its infrastructure. He also insisted that I be involved in every decision. We spent hours walking through the space, envisioning how it could be transformed. He listened to my ideas about traffic flow, about creating cozy reading nooks, about the importance of natural light. For browsing, I want people to feel like they're entering a sanctuary, I told him as we stood in what would become the main fiction section. Books should be displayed like art, but they should also be accessible. People should feel invited to touch them, to discover them. Show me, he said, and I found myself sketching layouts on napkins, describing the perfect bookstore I'd always dreamed of creating. The renovation took 4 months. During that time, Jonah and I met almost daily, sometimes to discuss business details, but often just to talk about books. I learned that his late wife, Margaret, had been working on a novel when she died. Story about a woman who opens a bookstore in a small town. She would have loved this project, he told me one afternoon as we watched workers installing custom yacht shelving. She always said that bookstores were proof that people still believed in magic. What happened to her novel? It's unfinished. I have her notes, her drafts, but I could never bring myself to read them. Too painful. Maybe someday you'll be ready. Maybe we could even publish it through the store. A small press run, something to honor her memory. Jonah looked at me with surprise. You do that? Of course, that's what bookstores are for, helping stories find their way into the world. The new chapter and verse opened on a crisp spring morning, exactly 1 year after the old store had closed. The line of customers stretched around the block, mix of old regulars who'd missed the store and new faces drawn by the media attention our unusual story had generated. Mrs. Ole was my first customer, just as she'd been my last customer at the old location. I knew you'd be back, she said, hugging me tightly. This neighborhood needs its bookstore. The store was everything I dreamed it could be and more. The main floor housed 50,000 carefully curated titles with reading nooks tucked into every corner and a children's section that looked like a fairy tale forest. The second floor writing center was already booked solid with workshops and author residencies. Between the lines, cafe was bustling with customers who lingered over coffee and books, and the apartments upstairs were home to a community of artists who'd already begun collaborating on projects and supporting each other's work. But the moment that meant the most to me came at the end of that first day when Jonah and I stood alone in the store, surrounded by the evidence of what we'd built together. Thank you, I said, for believing in this, for believing in me. Thank you for reminding me why stories matter and for showing me that it's never too late to choose dreams over practicality. What's next for you? Are you going to start writing again? Jonah smiled and pulled a notebook from his jacket pocket. I've already started. Margaret's story gave me the beginning, but I think I'm ready to write the ending myself. What's it about? It's about a woman who opens a bookstore and changes an entire community. It's about the magic that happens when people choose to believe in something bigger than profit margins. It's about second chances and the power of a single act of kindness. Sounds like a bestseller to me. We'll see, but either way, I know exactly where I want to have my book signing. 2 years later, chapter and verse had become more than just a bookstore. It was the heart of a thriving literary community. We hosted author events almost every night. Our writing workshops had waiting lists, and the cafe had become a gathering place for book lovers from across the city. Jonah's novel, The Last Customer, was published by a major house and became a surprise hit, with readers drawn to its authentic portrayal of small business struggles and the transformative power of human connection. His book signing at Chapter and Verse drew hundreds of people, including several publishers, who were interested in starting a small press imprint focused on literary fiction. You know what the best part is, Jonah said to me after the signing, as we cleaned up the store together. What's that? Margaret would have loved this, all of it, the store, the community, the fact that her unfinished story helped inspire something beautiful. She's part of this place, I said. Every book we sell, every author we support, every reader who discovers their new favorite story here, she's part of all of it, and so are you. You saved more than just a bookstore, Olivia. You saved a dream that I thought was dead. We saved it together. As I locked up the store that night, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. A year and a half ago, I'd been packing up my failed dreams, convinced that the world had no place for independent bookstores or the people who believed in them. Now, I was surrounded by proof that dreams don't die, they just wait for the right moment, the right partnership, the right act of faith to bring them back to life. The first edition of To Kill a Mockingbird that I'd given to Jonah sat in a place of honor behind the register, a reminder that sometimes the most important transactions aren't about money at all. They're about recognizing kindred spirits, about choosing generosity over self-interest, about believing that books and the people who love them can change the world. Chapter in Verse was more than just a bookstore. It was proof that when you operate from the heart, when you believe in the power of stories to connect us all, magic can happen in the most unexpected ways. And sometimes your last customer turns out to be the first chapter of an entirely new story. An absolutely beautiful story about second chances, the power of books, and how acts of kindness can transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. What's your favorite book? Share it in the comments below. If this story of dreams reborn, unexpected partnerships, and the magic of independent bookstores touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories about following your passion and finding hope in unexpected places. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next